I tell you about everything in the world and on the world and above the world and about the world, as well as around the world and through the world and in the world and near the world. I tell you about the winds and the weathers and the oceans and the lands and the continents that have risen and sunk since this little hunk of dirt first whirled off the burning sun. I tell you the men and the women that bathed their eyes in the zigzag lightning and hugged and kissed in the rumbling thunder, and about every Union wheel that ever did run down a Union road or down a Union rail, and every puff of Union smoke that ever did rise up out of a big, high Union smokestack.
There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why. We will beat 'em on the land, on the sea, and in the sky. There's a better world that's a-comin', tell you why.
Hello, this is the 4th episode of the Termi Online podcast, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
Gabe. Gabe. My name's Gabriel.
I'm Gabe.
No, you're Brandon. I'm Gabe.
I'm Gabe.
Everybody wants to be Gabe, I understand, but
I'm
only
Gabe.
I can be Gabe.
Big Lib. Big Lib Gabe.
Yeah. Alright, so what have you been up to last week? Quarantine update. How's everybody doing?
I'm dying, dude.
You're dying?
Yeah.
What
from
specifically about your life is making you die?
class shit. Sorry, that was my fucking mic because it's shitty too. But class shit's killing me. Just the amount of work. I think I said it in like the second episode that I'm still reading, writing, and studying like 16 hours a day. That shit hasn't stopped. I think enough students have complained though because one of my professors has like pushed back one of the due dates for an essay assignment, so I'm assuming that's happening. And I only had like one professor out of all the ones that I have that was like, because I'm assuming that they all thought that we'd be back on campus after like maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and so they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna keep the same. Yeah, they're just like, we're just gonna keep the same itinerary, and as soon as the gates open, we'll be back on campus, and we'll be able to continue and resume as we were originally scheduled to. And it's like, nah, dude, like.
Yeah, I mean, I wish they were right. I would have loved to have been wrong about this and just everything be completely fine and normal again, but unfortunately,
I'm wondering why they thought it was O-fucking-K to like just those extra hours that we had that we would have spent on like walking to their fucking class or like driving to like campus or whatever. They thought it'd be okay to add like a fucking book in like to make up for that shit. Like 200 pages you have to, like 200 extra pages you have to read because you're not in fucking class, like sitting down at a desk, like listening to their ass ramble on. Instead, just like watching a pre-recorded lecture. It's fucking stupid, dude.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's
I'm there with you a little bit. I guess that's just briefly. We won't stay on for very too long. But in my situation, I was talking to you about it in our DMs about how it's just like completely variable as to how each professor has handled the situation, and how I have a couple of different people I've talked to who are all taking only upper division classes that had their professors have made everything open note, and like online, like when they take all their tests online, they're able to use Google searches or notes and slides and whatever it is that they need to on like multiple choice exams, which of course, as everybody knows, usually makes things pretty easy. And those are upper division classes. Meanwhile, I have lower division classes that are like harder than that because I have 2 professors that have made it none of our tests open note or like open online or anything like that. So yeah, it's just super variable. Like if you have professors that are really chill and cool and understanding about what's going on, then like you're probably chilling. But if you don't, then you're kind of fucked. So. Anyways, enough about school. Paul, what have you been up to?
Nothing much. Just reading books, reading more on theory. Trying to learn more stuff online, just random things like how to properly program certain coding languages and all that stuff.
Yeah, if you guys haven't figured it out by now, Paul's our big brain 5-head guy who actually does read theory.
He's got the most wrinkles on his brain.
At the same time. What's that, Brandon?
He's got more wrinkles on his brain than everybody else here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Super wrinkly.
Brandon and I pulled the rear here with our smooth brains. Paul
Yeah,
really
my
carry
shit's
these
pretty fucking
conversations.
smooth, dude. It's smooth and moisturized, dude.
Exactly. Okay. Into the news. I think we talked and decided that the main topic of the show today is going to be the modern day lynching and execution of Ahmaud. How do you pronounce his name?
Ahmaud Arbery.
Arbery, who was killed by two white men in a small town in Georgia. There was a video that came out, that a very graphic video that came out that shows these two men effectively executing Ahmaud in this small town in Georgia. The full story is basically that a robbery had occurred in this small town in Georgia, and these two men had heard about it, and so they went out cruising around trying to find the perpetrator on their own, because in Georgia there's this beautiful stand your law esque law.
Stand your ground law.
Yeah, stand your ground law, like they
Yeah.
have in Florida and other states in the South, that basically states that you as a private citizen are able to arrest another private citizen because you suspect them of a crime. That alone as a law is problematic, as everybody I'm sure agrees with here. But they took advantage of this law and basically did a big old fat racism and then some by seeing Ahmaud on the side of the road. He was just doing his jogging and quote unquote mistaking him. I'm sure that'll be their defense. Mistaking him as the burglar, and as such tried to arrest him. Ahmaud resists, of course, just as any normal human being probably would, as you would think that you're probably getting mugged or robbed or worse. And as a result of the struggle, he ends up dead on the sidewalk in the middle of the road.
They used the fact that he went for the gun as a reason to like open fire on him, because it was considered self-defense at that point.
Right.
Which just it just shows how like arbitrary and archaic like certain laws in the country are, and maybe even the practice of law. Because if that's like what's encoded and that's what's considered like self-defense and shit like that, then anything and everything could be considered self-defense if you like march up to somebody and like are holding a knife but aren't threatening them, and then that person goes in like and tries to take it from you or some shit. Because they're going to have to reason that out in its context. But the next beautiful thing is that these dudes apparently had connections to the DA in that area of Georgia, and she waited, right, to recuse herself.
Okay, so the rest of the story basically goes as such, is that the actual event occurred, I don't know the exact date, I probably should have looked it up, but it happened a while ago, prior to this becoming big news is the important part. And no charges were filed on the two men that effectively, again, executed this guy. This is very much a modern day lynching for reasons that we'll get into later. But yeah, so nothing happened, no charges were filed, absolutely nothing happened to these two guys that murdered this guy. And the reason for that, as it turns out, is that one of them has a direct connection to the DA in that particular part of the state. I think one of them either worked under her at some point, or had some kind of familial connection, or maybe both, something along those lines. But either way, they had a connection. And as such, because of that connection, no charges were filed. And granted, that's like adds a whole nother layer to the conversation here.
This was in February of this year.
It happened in February of this year.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
holy shit.
yeah.
So it's been 3 months. That's absolutely fucking insane. So yeah, this helps us get into the broader conversation too. Is that if this happened 3 months ago, and it's only now gaining traction because it was this video was effectively, like, it blew up, and became a national story because of it. If we didn't have this video and this story didn't blow up, this never would have been reported on, right? And this guy would have just been another statistic at some point with no context behind it. And again, this feeds into like a broader conversation that I want to have here, which is that this stuff happens still in the modern day. These like what is realistically a modern day lynching in these small ethno-nationalist shitty little towns across America.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like jaw-dropping because the one thing that you can get along with like other libs about is like this type of shit. And for the most part, sometimes when they talk about it, it comes off as like patronizing, but when you have the video right there and you watch it and you just see, well, for one, the people that are filming it are a part of these dudes. Like the person that's filming it looks to be like in the car with the other dudes that went and attacked Ahmaud, and it's just like devastating to watch that shit happen because it's happening like it's like in your own backyard. It feels like even though it's in Georgia and it's a state quite away from our state, it's still in like the country, and this shit is like you feel like you would only ever witness this in a country where there's a certain like non-stressing on like vigilante justice. So for it to happen here, it's just weird. Like vigilantism is just weird. Because most of the time that you hear about it, you hear it being praised, like in the news. Like this guy whose daughter was like sexually assaulted by some dude, and then he went out and he like murdered that guy or something. And I believe something like that happened earlier this year or late last year. Like I can like vividly remember reading a story like that. But then this is the other side of the coin where it's just like dudes who were out, whatever their motivation was, they like clung to one identifier about the person, and the first one that they saw happened to be this guy who's not wearing anything suspicious. He's literally in like a large white t-shirt and shorts. Like nothing inconspicuous or anything. Like on a hot like Georgia day, it looks like a sunny Georgia day or whatever in February, and long sleeve shirts or whatever and hoods, like whatever the whole stereotypical like burglar type bullshit that you get from the news and shit like that. Not happening here. Like not happening at all. It's just a white t-shirt and shorts, like total robber attire, and they just fucking started opening fire on him, and it's just fucking ridiculous. So
Yeah, again, it's just like it's literally equivalent to a modern day lynching, because this is exactly what they used to do back in the 50s, in the civil rights era, and even before then, when lynching was more predominant, or at least more out in the open than it is today. Is that they, you know, like we discussed a little bit before starting the episode, not to get too libby here, but you know, it's the entire premise behind the To Kill a Mockingbird book, right? Is that you have an unidentified African American male who allegedly committed a crime, and you have a mob go out, which is what these two guys were. Maybe it's only, I don't know how many people you need to constitute a mob, but these two effectively were a lynch mob in this particular instance, that go out and find another African American who fits the narrative or the description or whatever that is that they need to justify doing what they do enough, and effectively execute them and lynch them. I mean, that's literally what happened here. And I don't know, it's just crazy, because part of the topic that I wanted to kind of talk about, or create a broader conversation on this, is that stuff like this, in my view, it happens way more than we realize still in modern America. And I think it's very much a result of urbanization, and then as a result of that, of cosmopolitanization, which is to say that a majority of Americans live in an urbanized setting. where things like racism, or at least overt racism, that leads to incidents like this are far and few between than they are in a small, like, rural hell town like this. And so often I feel like we forget that these small towns exist, and then we forget the atrocities that occur within these small towns. So I just, whenever I see a story like this come up, it doesn't come as like a surprise to me. Like, I see a lot of people that are like outraged of this happening and being like, I don't know if it's like feigned outrage or feigned like ignorance of them being like, oh wow, how could this happen?
Yeah,
This
that's
story is
what I was.
extraordinary.
That's why I was
Like,
like
this isn't
talking about
happening
like
all the time.
patronizing. That's why
Sorry,
I
say that
was
again?
saying it was. That's why I was saying it's like patronizing, like when they do it sometimes.
Yeah, they use it as like a, I don't know. I can't even get into the mind of like a liberal when they
Because
tackle these things.
it feels political. It's like they
Right.
want like Chris Hayes say something. Like tell me what to think, Chris. Like it's just weird like the way that they kind of like discombobulate the story, but the story is right there, and their whole response is like to get rid of guns. But the guns are it's just one symptom. It's not because I'm fully for a armed and automated like left wing, but this is something different. This is an attitude, dude. Like this is a
Yeah,
culture
I'm
and
sorry.
an
Yeah,
This has
attitude.
and
absolutely nothing to
like
do with guns.
yeah, and like a lot of the gun arguments, like a lot of it originates, and specifically, a lot of it is just racist. Well, started from racist views and all that stuff. Like, what was it when the Black Panthers and what was it many black communities started arming themselves to, what was it, for just self defense back in, way back when the 60s, all that stuff. Like California, was it? That's how it got so strict in gun laws, thanks to Reagan while he was in governor. Is when the Black Panthers started defending communities with just guns, and they were just, what was it, riding around and patrolling, and all. It's like, ooh, scary black people. And then all of a sudden, yeah, they just very strict gun laws, and like Reagan's been like, what was it? Was a huge gun grabber when he was in the presidency and all that stuff. So a lot, like, the gun argument is not the way we treat. It's not the real way to treat these sort of things or these sort of problems. It's a much
No,
more with
I mean,
the
especially in this case, especially in this case, it has nothing to do with fucking guns. It has more to do, like I said, in my opinion, with this kind of like ignorance that most liberal Americans have, and just Americans as a whole have, when it comes to understanding rural culture in America. Like, again, and I think this is a result of urbanization, and as such, like, and as a result of urbanization, cosmopolitanization. And what I mean by that is that the interactions that most Americans have with other Americans is in urban settings, which means you're exposed, and what does that mean exactly? It means that you're exposed to more different types of races, cultures, media, all that kind of thing. And that's what cosmopolitanization is that when you're exposed to more cultures and races and media and things like that, that you're more open and understanding of the situations that people find themselves in, and specifically when it comes to like race relations and such. And so most Americans, I don't want to say like every American, but like urban Americans and thus most Americans have this urban perception, and then they forget just how bad it is in these small rural towns. And so when an event like this happens, and it's like people are freaking out about it, be like, oh my god, how could this happen? And oh, this story is such a tragedy, and they act like it's this one-off thing that just randomly happened, right? But like we said in the very beginning of discussing this, the original incident happened in fucking February. The date is May 6th. This is 3 months more or less after the original event started, and only now is it becoming a big story. And the only reason it's becoming a big story is because of just pure chance. The video got leaked and it blew up on social media. So my point is that this stuff happens way more than most Americans would like to either acknowledge or admit. And I think that's worth discussing, because again, like, when when liberals love to say, "Oh, we need to cut funding." Who was it? Chunk Yogurt fucking got in trouble on Twitter. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? About he made another dumb fucking comment about how the blue states subsidize the red states, and so we need to cut funding and for the red states and let them suffer on their own. Well, I mean, what do you expect people's lives who are already shitty that live in these awful fucking tiny rural towns like that? How do you think their conditions are going to get if these kind of things are already happening, right? So it's just, again, like, my point of bringing this up is just to have a broader conversation about how there seems to be a disconnect between most Americans that live in an urban setting and then the reality of the situation of people that live in rural settings. I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, he's like ready to choke off like one section of the population just because he perceives like all of them as being bad, but it's like there's gonna be some really good people caught up in that shit, and you're just gonna make their lives like a million times worse than it already is, because a good portion of those people are probably living there because they're either born there or they can only afford to like live in these certain areas. And let's be honest, like a lot of the shit that the Republicans do in like Republican counties and Republican states, a lot of it is motivated by having like property values like really really cheap property values in like certain areas, and really 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 expensive property values in other areas, and that's how they're enforcing a caste system in their own way. And some of the people that find themselves like stuck in that are in that way because the state essentially enforces it in that way, and it keeps certain communities down and it keeps certain populations down. And then the rhetoric turns into, oh, these populations, they're bad populations, and you start to relate bad with like impoverished, and then you start to have those types of attitudes about it. But it's because these states aren't doing their job essentially, which is to bring stability there. And so you start to see what the infection of the state does, and how like it only takes like one or two like really really fucking shitty people in power in their little fiefdom to kind of like fuck everything over and fuck people up. And it's usually these small town assholes, dude. Um, they're always pulling some bullshit. They're always having like weird family wars and shit like that. It's fucking weird, dude. And this mentality still exists, and you see it a lot more in like history books than you do now. But it's fucking out there, and it's
Oh,
like
it's
it's
100% out
literally
there.
in your backyard. Yeah, it's in your backyard. I mean, there's probably places in the central portion of our state where this shit's happening, and I can
Yep.
guarantee you it's happening, and we just don't hear or see it because it's so localized. And this one just became visceral because of the video, and that's what it takes, is like an actual, like your eyelids being peeled back and being forced to kind of like watch it, and you can't like look away because it's all these things that you kind of hear like libs kind of like acting like it's a reason for them to get on a high horse and like preach to you. And so you kind of do like let it fall to the wayside, because this is usually what they use to kind of address the symptoms but not the disease. And in that addressing of the symptoms, they prop up like the worst type of people. They continue down like the whole like laws and shit that they want to like enforce and stuff. They just use it as like some sort of political platform. That's the worst part about libs, is they do the same thing as the Republicans, where they don't let a situation go to waste. And all the rhetoric that they can use where they're saying that it's about like people and shit like that. I can guarantee you if the NRA was dumping like millions of bucks into the DNC, they'd be all over that shit, and they would change their tune real quick. So it falls on the wayside until you actually see the shit playing out, and you realize how kind of like it might be like 6 or 7 states away, but still, dude, it's still so visceral when you see it like play out like that, and you see like almost every single like move that was made by each person in the video. Like
Yeah, no,
the
and
dude's acting like an enforcer, the dude's taking the shot, Ahmaud trying to protect himself. It's just fucking brutal, dude.
Yeah, and like you said, like it doesn't necessarily even have to be 5 states away, or it isn't 5 states away. Like you said, like, you don't think that this kind of uh like I mean I don't even what do you call it? It's like it's racism obviously, but it's like it's systematic. It's on a whole nother level. It's a racism that like takes uh like it's I don't it's advanced racism or some
It's a
dumbass shit.
racism. It's a racism that like transcends the chyron on the bottom of a fucking CNN like news piece and shit.
Yeah, it's like
Because it's
material.
what,
It's real.
yeah,
It's a like you said. It's like a fiefdom-esque element to it in the sense that you really are a second-class citizen. Like really, really, really are. Not just in language, but in material conditions, and then in the way that people treat you in whatever particular instance, whatever town that you live in. If you are that second-class citizen, because I can think of we're all California boys, Southern California, like you said, in Central California, where all of our agricultural work is. How many of those agricultural workers are immigrants, like particularly Mexican immigrants? Like, I would bet all of my money that you can find several, either small towns or even on a smaller level, like smaller like farms or agricultural centers, where these Mexican immigrants are 100% treated as second-class citizens, and that stories like this one that happened in Georgia have already happened in the past that have not been reported on, or continue to happen and will not be reported on. Like, I would bet every fucking cent that I have that stuff is happening in rural towns and rural settings, even in California. Um, Again, like it's a very pervasive problem that I think a lot of people don't realize is still happening and happening on a large scale, and that's just like as a result of our urbanization. Most everybody lives in a city. Like, most Americans aren't like as I'll call it like 19th century racist as a lot of people in that are I gotta be careful here. I'm not trying to say that all rural people are racist. I'm obviously not saying that. I'm saying that these particular small towns often breed the opportunity for groups of like what I would call white ethno-nationalists to cultivate a culture within those small towns that basically create second-class citizens. They attribute, uh, language and action that makes minorities second-class citizens.
Mm.
So
and
Yeah,
this is
well,
something that I wanted to kind of like talk about and address because as a student of history, we can see like how the plantation system reverberated and just like completely destroyed the black community. But you also have reverberations that completely like mauled and like scarred portions of the white communities there too, because a lot of them were working side by side with slaves. A lot of them are descendants of, majority of them are descendants and people that served in the Confederate Army were not slaveholders. They were like tradesmen and shit. And a lot of them are descendants of essentially like laborers that were essentially brainwashed and propagandized into believing that because of their skin color they were better than black people. And through that kind of like system of control, these are essentially descendants of people who were in the same class as slaves at one point, but because they were taught that their skin color made them better and superior, it's just completely like wrecked relations, and it's completely mauled any sort of like cultural like bridge and gap that probably may have been made through like maybe class distinction or something like that. And it's devastating, and this shit is what's the consequence of it all is just shit like this happening. And so like in some ways that might be a spicy take, but we're going to have to address an elephant in the room, that the plantation system, because you got fucking like Richard Spencer, like even like crying in the most like baby whiniest voice that these were the people that he like owned and shit like this at one point, and he's doing the exact same thing that they were doing like during plantation era, was telling like white dudes, disenfranchised white dudes, that they're superior because of their race and shit. And he's the only one out of all of them that's a descendant of that fucking plantation aristocracy. So he's still whipping them up. There's still reverberations from this shit. And he's just one conduit among many, among thousands, and he's just the most popular because he puts a face to it, because he's cleaned up, I guess, well enough for people to want to put him like in interviews and shit with shitty neolibs who just want to make a buck off of fucking views and shit. But we're going to have to be honest and be like, how deep did this shit affect American culture? And it's pretty fucking deep. Like, it like really wrecked the black community and even portions of like whites in the area. So the culture is a fucking mess, dude.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack there. And it's, again, like, my theory as to why it's prevalent in rural towns significantly, not to say it's absent in urban environments, like, that's obviously a dumb thing to say, but it is significantly more absent in urban environments than rural environments because of cosmopolitanization, which again, like, a lot of people don't realize that that's a thing, and that's why urban environments, like, you know, people like to be like, oh yeah, the United States isn't that racist, or, you know, the people around me, I know plenty of Mexican people or Japanese people, or, you know, whatever nationality that you want to name, and yeah, they're all cool. I have no problems with them. I don't know why anybody would have a problem with them. Well, in a rural town where you have, like you said, this history of hierarchy and history of you know, learned ignorance and learned racism as a result of the history of slavery in this nation, where that cosmopolitanization has never ever taken any kind of hold because of that hierarchy, that it's no surprise that stuff like this is still very prevalent. But Paul, you wanted to say something a minute ago.
What was it? What was it? I gotta point out, what was it? Urban can still populate and grow racist people. It's just that they're the ones that own stuff and all that stuff. And, you know, we were talking about earlier that a lot of labor around here, especially southern states, well, southern western states, are off of, like, cheap labor from immigrants. Mainly, like, a lot of things like farming or just cheap stuff like that. And that may have them, like, that's why you kind of like see like someone that like doesn't seem like they would like might probably be racist, but then at the same time support like a more open border sort of thing, because like they know there's a cheap labor force going through here, so all that stuff, so they would get the benefit and everything.
Yeah. I mean, do you have something else to say? Or?
What is it?
I don't want to cut you off.
Not really. It's well, like, it's just that it's a lot of the conversation is usually owned and controlled by stuff. So that's why one of the things, it's like it's really hard to get around this argument, because people work this in basically people believing this is as like a dichotomy, basically, where you're either this way or that way. Which is not how it works. And like, what was it? There's many things that can be talked about, and many people that are not being brought into the conversation, mainly the people who like pay for these things, and not like George Soros type of explaining like, oh, he's paying all the protesters or whatever. It's like, it's deep into societal stuff. Like, what was it? always been like to try and make a dichotomy always on purpose sort of thing. It's all that
Yeah,
stuff,
to divide us, right?
pretty much.
You're saying the dichotomy between urban and rural, like you're strictly
Well,
talking
not just
about
about,
that, or...
well, like, just on any argument on certain things, usually with those types of groups of people, and it could be on different things, like, on immigration policy, like, like, one wants to open borders and all that stuff, and, like, usually people will try to defend that because because they see the other option as, like, very conservative, option from, you know, like, what was it, from a white supremacist sort of thing, and and vice versa. Like, it's just being a lot, like, the views are being controlled sort of thing. Like, they're seeing, like, the worst of people on arguments, and that's usually how things work. And that just works on a lot of things. And one of the things that could be brought on upon this is, like, to focus on trying to heal, well, not just heal, but just like make a connection between rural and urban, because I've seen like really great people on the internet who are able to like decipher what an urban person says and like tries to communicate stuff, because there's like many different things that urban people experience or not experience that urban people do or not, like, and all that stuff. One example is like constant police. Like, people, like, you know, rural, there is not, like, constant police oversight on everything sort of thing. But rural people still experience, like, the ATM, like, you know, arms, tobacco, and, you know, alcohol sort of thing. Like, you know, or alphabet men or whatever. That's what some call on certain agencies. But, like, I've seen people make people understand that. And, like, there could be a better conversation sort of thing that could be made between these types of people. Because,
Right.
like, and that's one of the main things, like, see our differences, but, like, we can always reach, like, a ground where we can understand something bigger than this conversation.
I think that's the critique of liberals that, like, Brandon and myself made, which is that more so Brandon made the argument that, you know, when an event like this happens, liberals like to use it as a political cudgel for, you know, ulterior motives and ulterior issues that aren't necessarily connected, and yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, and you say that there are good people that are able to talk about issues.
Brian,
Yeah, you cut out a little bit.
Yeah, can you say that
They're
again?
good people. What's up?
You
You cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I don't know where I cut out. I was just saying, like, I don't. The argument that Brandon was making about how liberals use, you know, events like this as a political cudgel for ulterior motives. Like, they're not good about talking about rural.
You were mentioning good people. Like,
Right.
people
Yeah,
that-
and good people. Like Paul was saying, how there are good people out here talking about it. I said, like, shout out to like the Trillbillies. I'm sure you guys know who the Trillbillies are. They have their own podcast, but they're pretty great, and they're all from the Appalachia region, and they talk about.
And then there's the
rural
John
issues.
Brown's army, and a lot of them are in the South, and of course there are good people. I think that because Paul was talking about like the string pullers, and
Wait, what? Talk about
weren't you were saying like George Soros or something, like
Oh, yeah, like-
the mythical string pullers or some shit.
Oh,
like-
yeah, those types of things, yeah.
I mean, it's
Like, it'd be nice to be paid to go out to events, but I don't think that's what actually happens. Like,
no, it definitely doesn't, because
well,
I
I
would
mean,
be
like,
like-
that last thing I just said was a joke. Please don't take me seriously on that.
Paul, you just
Yeah,
canceled,
but-
my friend.
But no, I like shit like this. Like, it's the difference between like the pussy hat people, right? The pussy hat, and then people who are actually desperate for like change because shit like this is happening. And I don't know. There might be genuine pussy hatters that might like fucking listen to this, but honestly, like, all I really saw at those things were like Karens. So it falls on like a lot of deaf ears. Like it's just a reason to kind of like get out and do your like neolib cheering and shit, and then just fall back on your word when it turns out that like one of your guys is fucking inappropriately touched somebody or some shit. And usually in that sort of like realm, it also translates to this one where it's like they don't really like care that much. They just want your fucking vote, and it's sad and it's pathetic. And there are actually people out there that fucking want things to change, but that doesn't get you votes.
Yeah, again, this is 100% a modern day lynching, and it should be facilitating a response on a level of complete a complete systematic investigation of the DA and all the shenanigans that happened there, alongside a full prosecution of everybody involved, which of course is what has not happened yet. Now, again, that this has gained a little bit of national attention and traction, maybe we'll see something come out of that, but probably not. I mean, that's usually how these stupid fucking things go. Everybody gets away scot-free in this stupid fucking country if you're white and you...
Or you're in a position that's powerful enough.
Right.
Because everybody under you is a fucking power grabber and a star fucker. And if you get thrown out too soon, too quick, or in a way that makes you who's under their boot like not warmed up enough to them, then it's all bad for you. It like reverberates down. That's where the real trickle down happens, dude. So
yeah, I don't know. This entire story is an abomination, and again, like a good reminder for people out there. Like, the main reason I wanted to like bring this up and talk about it is, again, like, in my view, this stuff happens way more often than what we realize on a day-to-day basis. Just as evidence is it happening 3 months ago, and now we're only hearing about it. So.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things is like, I saw something interesting. I think this was talked about a while ago. It's like, you know, the police in Chicago had like a black site that could do whatever with people there, and weirdly, it was connected to several thousands of disappearance, like make people disappear, sort of thing. Well, I think people came back, but they're off the record, so anything can happen there. What was it? So there is obviously like a corruption there that people don't see, because people can't see like that big level of corruption here. We always see it in like other countries, like, oh, this police station, I mean, these people, the police here, the police over there make the people disappear and all that stuff. Like, it can happen here as well.
Yeah. Well, it's just to kind of wrap this up on this topic, would just touch on like the urban-rural divide again. Like, it's good that you brought that up, because the systematic corruption, the corruption at the systematic level is not necessarily, there's no divide necessarily between urban and rural counties, in my opinion at least. I think it happens here too, in an urban environment. It's just, I think it's a little bit more difficult to perpetuate here than it is in a rural environment, because a lot of the rural stuff just goes uncovered and unnoticed, like it did with this one. But by no means does cosmopolitanization fix systematic corruption, right? Like, I don't think anybody can make that argument. Cosmopolitanization helps at the local level to stop things like what happened with this unfortunate gentleman, of him being lynched by these guys. Like, I don't think you can find a California story or any story in an urban place where you have people like acting as a lynch mob. I don't think that happens as much as it would in a small town. But I think the corruption at a systematic level, like you were saying, is very much prevalent here still in urban environments. But anyways, let's move on from that story. It's a little bit depressing.
First off, let's say rest in peace to Ahmaud Arbery. He was only 25 too, by the way, and I hope that his parents and family get some sort of fucking justice in this fucking world. So,
yep.
Yeah,
I
let's
mean, I hope so.
let's move on.
Yeah, so the second thing that we wanted to touch on is a lot more lighthearted and a lot more fun and hilarious, which is the story that came out, I believe it was yesterday on the 5th, or maybe it was the day before then, that story came out that Senator Bernard Sanders does not, is not pushing or endorsing for Elizabeth Warren to be Joe Biden's vice president pick. What are your guys' initial reaction to that?
Good for him. Dudes rock 2020.
Mhm.
Liz Warren sucks. I've always said it. I said that she
I mean,
sucks for a while here now.
that is the initial joke that I made with this news story came out, because if you guys remember, there was that whole news cycle. It was like the first like clash between Sanders and Warren after one of the debates. If you guys remember, when she like pulled him aside and made like this whole big debacle or whatever, and it was a result of the story that came out that basically alleged that Sanders said to Warren that a woman could not be president, right? Or a woman could not run for president. And so the joke of this entire thing and the story coming out is that, hey, maybe that was right. Maybe Sanders literally is the dude's rock candidate and actually hates women. Like that is the joke to come out of this. Is that maybe Sanders actually is the dude's rock candidate, dude. Who knows, man?
Yeah, because I mean, I'm glad that he did it. If he's gonna get as political as he has to, like endorsing Biden, it's like whatever. I think we all saw that. But
Right, again, like, to touch on that briefly, if you didn't see that coming and you're very surprised and upset of that happening, like you don't know as much about politics as you think you do. Like,
yeah,
just putting that
that's
aside.
basic electoral politics, like
Yeah,
101. Like he
exactly.
was going to do that. He's going to make some concessions. The thing is that there's that picture, I think, going around. I think it was Biden. He was like holding a knife to like Bernie's back or some shit. And I don't know. It's funny. It's funny to think about. And I'm pretty sure like maybe there were some threats made, because wasn't there like that documentary where fucking what's his name, George Stephanopoulos or something, like during the Clinton admin was like making calls and like threatening people who were going to come out and against Clinton, and was going to like he was not blackmailing them, but he was like threatening them that if they come out, like some shit was going to happen to them. Like that whole entire fucking admin was a fucking chaotic mess. And I don't doubt that the DNC machine was like ready to stab him in the back, but I highly doubt that Biden's a good representation of somebody who had enough like cognition to like threaten Bernie, because I'm pretty sure he even has a hard time holding his dick when he pisses right now. So
Probably, yeah. There's the whole like draw a clock Joe meme thing too. It's like that if you guys don't know, that's like a one of the tests for testing for dementia. Is it?
oh
They
yeah,
can't
with the
draw a clock.
fucking like the 9, 6, and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
all
yeah,
of them
yeah.
like bunched together and
Yeah,
shit.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where like the draw a clock Joe meme comes from. Yeah, that. So.
Joe, please
Yeah.
draw a
Yeah.
clock.
But
What's
yeah,
up?
this.
Please draw a
go ahead.
clock. No, just kidding.
Yeah, draw a clock, Joe. Draw a clock. I'm waiting. I'm
Alright,
waiting, Joe. Still haven't drawn that
All
clock.
Alright, Paul, so what's the
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. This story is like I said, it's
What's
like
the
a nice
topic
break.
for
What's
today?
on that we just talked about? Because to me, it's absolutely fucking hilarious. Because it is literally a 180 of that like a lot of people are having to do, because it's insane that this was only like 2 months ago that all this shit was happening. But 2 months ago, when it was clear that Warren had no path to the nomination, like it was, I mean, it was obvious even before 2 months ago. But you know, Liz was clinging on and stayed in on Super Tuesday. We've had this conversation before. I assert that if Liz was not in on Super Tuesday, that Sanders would have swept Super Tuesday and then subsequently continued to sweep states. Not sweep, but to win Super Tuesday. Again, it's all
Yeah.
about momentum in politics. Anyways, so now we have Warren stands doing a complete 180 turn on the where before they were saying that Warren doesn't owe Sanders anything, like any kind of endorsement or anything like that. Well, now look how the tables turn, and now it's the Liz lads, the Warren stands who are begging for Bernie's endorsement, and now you have all the Bernie people on Twitter saying,
The
"Oh, well,
fucking
Sanders doesn't owe you anything."
fucking
So,
Warren weirdos. Warren
Warren
weirdos.
Liz lads. I think Liz lads is hilarious. It sounds funny
Yeah.
to me.
But yeah, fuck Liz Warren. The big the big thing for me was I'm still waiting for her to kind of turn this into some like victim play, because that's what her whole campaign like resorted to the minute that they saw shit was not looking good for them. So I'm waiting to see how she turns this into like some victim like complex type bullshit. And then the other funny thing is that she's like saying like I don't believe that Joe Biden's a fucking sexual predator. I don't believe any of that. He's still a great servant to the American people. And
Liz
it's just like,
Warren is like, to me, one of the most funny political figures because she's been described by people that have been close to her as like the most like cookie cutter nihilistic politician out there, like like zero sum politician. But she's so fucking bad at it. It is so funny how bad her political instincts are. I mean, the way that she ran her campaign was horrible. I mean, Jesus Christ, she ended up in third in her own state in the Massachusetts primary on Super Tuesday. I mean, that takes a lot of skill to do to end up third in your own state when you are the senator of said state. I mean, that is insane.
I'm assuming
for
it's
that outcome.
the elitism, just like Boston elitism. They have all the academies, they have the best like school systems, and they're all just going to consolidate around her. But people on the ground were like not buying it because she's probably like inefficient in ways that it affects like the common man, and they just like don't buy her shit and are just like, yeah, actually, you know what, voting for Bernie is a good thing, and they voted for Bernie. And I can tell you right now that that's probably when her campaign was like, all right, it's mask off time, let's just be the shittiest campaign that's only going to be in it to like mess with him.
I think that was way before then, personally. I really do think she
Like being like put it into overdrive, because wasn't it after she lost her state that she pulled the whole like he said that a
No, that
woman
was
can't be
before
president.
No, that's
Oh
way
really?
before. Yeah, that was
No,
like,
her campaign. Like, I mean, we'll
bro,
never
this was like
know.
2 months ago. You're watching all this. How can you forget?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll probably never know. But like, if I had to put money on it, like, I would not be surprised if she was running strictly as an opposition candidate to Sanders, like just strictly with the purpose of, you know, undercutting him at every single way, whether it be stealing some of the progressive vote. And you can get into the numbers and argue that a lot of her supporters had already defected to Sanders before Super Tuesday and blah blah blah. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But it is my
Sorry,
belief
Paul.
still.
I transcend electoral politics, so if it
Yes,
all
yes.
looks like soup to me, then it looks like soup to me.
Okay,
So all
let's-
events happen at the same time, all things occur like not on a timeline, but in a line that just goes straight up, because it all just eats ass to me.
Well, listen here, nerd. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're the one that wants to turn like esoteric theory into praxis.
Well, yes.
Yes, he says completely unironically. Yes, well, actually, yes.
All right. Well, I
Me-
mean,
I'm just
I
cur-
don't know. The only thing that I took away really from that whole entire thing is that I was right. Just Liz Warren sucks. I never really like paid attention to her. A lot of people saw her as like, okay, so when it was happening, a lot of people saw her as a threat, but in a way where it was like she was going to edge out ahead of Bernie, but not in the way that she actually like was the threat. So I kind of had in my head that she, like, the only real threat that she was of course like how it played out, which I think I think I told you, Gabe, like that's probably what was going to happen. But at first, like, it was really hard for like me to say that to you because you still wanted her to be good in the end, but obviously she wasn't. But a lot of people thought that she's gonna edge out, and I was like, nah, she's too like politician like. And what Dems who want a politician and not like someone like Bernie, what they want is somebody who's going to like tick a ton of the boxes, which is like had some sort of like success like in the past, which winning the presidency twice, like and and Biden being VP, that's like their like bread and butter. Like being a part of an admin like that is Dem bread and butter. Like they will eat that shit up all day. So he had that going for him, and just on top of that, being like a household name too. Like you have like it's legit like bottom barrel like means testing, but it fucking works for them. And so I never really saw her ever like edging out over Biden. I think that I did see it more as like what she ended up being as a spoiler, but in the past episode I was like, I don't.
One point that
I
she
mean,
was
in
leading.
the past episode, like the second episode, I was like, I don't think that she really had like that much of an effect, but she had like enough. Like I still think that Bernie's campaign messed up, like in specific ways, which was attacking like the right person, and not just like like just accepting the blows and just trying to cushion the blows. Like it's like in politics, is if you're gonna be involved in politics and this is like the thing that you want to focus on, you can't create a hole for you to like dig yourself out of. Like you just can't, because that's a lot harder than like hitting back and just accepting the consequence of the hit back. So for him to kind of just like let the blows come, I think he messed up there in that way too much too, for me to really think that she did enough. But if he had like done like very very specific things differently, I don't think it would have had as much of an effect as it did, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
I don't know. That's a whole nother conversation to have. But I don't
yeah,
know. Specifically coming back to this like story, it's just like in some ways poetic justice and fucking hilarious. And then I think like the take of like Bernie Sanders actually being the dude's rock candidate is actually the thing to take away from this story. I think that the original dude's rock moment that he had might actually have some merit behind it. But yeah. All right. Well, you should probably start wrapping it up. You guys have anything else you want to bring up quickly? Relevant?
What was it? Not really. What was it? By the way, people are wondering about other things like Venezuela invasion and all that stuff. We're planning to do that next. We're gonna do that next week.
Yeah, we're gonna do that next week. I think that's a little bit too broad of a topic because it goes into like I'm sure we'll get into a topic about U.S. imperialism.
yeah, I'm gonna need to fucking read for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody's noticed that this shit has just been bouncing off of my smooth brain like this whole time. So now it's time
Yeah,
for
we
like.
get it. You don't like electoralism.
Now I gotta like actually like read shit, and it's not like my complaints in the beginning wasn't a big like hindrance for me like actually like reading into more of the shit. But
You know what? There is one last thing that I want to ask you guys that I don't know myself. I don't know a ton about other than just like from memes that I've seen. But have you guys heard about? Do you guys know who Jesse Ventura is?
Oh yeah, just see the body.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he dropped out recently.
Wait, did he drop out? Or...
Yeah, he had family issues. He has to deal with that, so he dropped out.
No, dude. Okay, well, first of all, I don't know much about the guy. I've seen like only a couple of clips, but he seemed like the most closest person I can compare him to is Mike Gravel. If Mike Gravel had gotten into the debates, where he just would have been up on stage like saying to everybody's face that like you're a piece of shit warmonger and like sellout and
Dude, he's been
lobbyist, apologist, and all that
he's
kind
been
of stuff.
doing this shit since like the 90s. I remember an interview he had. This is like during the Opie and Anthony days where I can guarantee like neither of you've heard of Opie and Anthony, right?
Who?
No.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'm clocking myself like saying this shit, but there's it's two like radio jocks, and then they had a quote unquote comedian who was the third chair, like third mic, and it was Jim Norton. And there's a video of like them two exchanging words because Jim Norton's just being a little piece of shit, and Jesse Ventura is like doing Jesse Ventura, like just doing his thing, and Jim Norton is just an asshole. The only thing is, I think that yeah, Jesse Ventura can get a little bit belligerent about certain things, but
I don't know much about the guy. I
yeah.
literally don't know much. I just know like from like the 2 or 3 videos that I saw, and he seemed like I don't. He gives me libertarian vibes. So I feel like
I think
I mean,
he's
Jesse- are you
he's
talking about
registered
Jesse?
independent, but
Are you
for a
talking about-
time it felt like because I remember for a time in like 2010, 2011, being a libertarian meant you were like anti-war, but weren't.
right. That's what I mean. Like it's like
Yeah.
that dangerous breed of libertarians that like get a couple of like really obvious easy things right. Like yeah, U.S. imperialism is bad, and like lobbyists are bad. And
Well,
certain
yeah,
aspects
I mean,
of
or
bureaucratic governments is bad. Like yeah, those are like I'm like yeah, that's really good. That sounds good. And, like he's being really abrasive about it, which is really good to see sometimes. I'm like yeah, but then it's like you get those vibes where again it's like yeah, those are just some like things that like libertarians believe in, and like those are the good things that they say until they open their mouth about say like I don't know, like literally anything else, and then you're just like, wait a second, this guy's a fucking idiot. So I
Which
didn't
is
know
a
much
weird
about him.
thing.
wait, who
Because
were we
it's
talking
like,
about specific? Wait, who were we talking about specifically?
Well,
Jesse
Jesse
Ventura.
Ventura.
Yeah. The like you know he's like a climate denier, right? A climate change
Or I
denier.
think I saw something about that, and then him like retracting that, or like stepping back on those remarks or something like that. But that's my
Okay.
point. Right? Like I don't know much about the guy. I don't know if I should be championing him as like a good person or whatever. I just thought from what I saw, it would have been fucking
probably not.
hilarious
Yeah.
to see him
I would-
on stage.
I would say that he's a wash. Just because, yeah, he'll get like a couple things right, and he'll like argue with like the right people, which like in my case it was like Jim Norton and shit. But then he'll like do weird shit like Paul said, and it's not like he's retracting it. He's retracting it from like a public statement. That doesn't mean he's changed his
Probably,
mind.
right, yeah.
And the big thing was that there was that time in like 2010, 2011 where libertarians were like slightly center left, like what they wanted to do was just like smoke weed and not go to war. But that libertarian to like fascist pipeline has just gotten so extreme as of late that
Like things like the Tea Party movement and all that stuff.
yeah, and I know that a lot of like alt-right dudes are like ex quote unquote Ron Paul libertarians and shit like that. It's so weird. Like I remember when Ron Paul was super popular in high school. Like I like was actively annoyed by like what how everybody was like acting about him, and even in some ways when I was like Bernie started running in like 2015, so it's kind of at the end of like being in community college, like, and not really being like politically too active. But even like the way that they treated Bernie too, it had flashes of like the Ron Paul era like type treatment, and they both got like hosed by their same respective parties. So they kind of they work together, but that brand of like libertarianism was super popular for a time, like extremely popular.
Yeah.
Because for everybody, it meshed like the best of both worlds, but it was really like the fucking weirdest like moment, you know, being a fucking anti-theist like four horsemen worshiper and a libertarian. Like, imagine if our country was ran by those types of fucking
Oh
people,
my
dude.
god. Yeah, you were making fun of me last week, like, for being a baby brain and, like, a little bit of a lib and whatnot, but, like, to me, the epitome of baby brain ideology is libertarianism. Like, I mean, I think that's what most people would say,
Yeah.
like, is the baby brain
Yeah.
of ideologies, but, like, my hatred for libertarianism is, like, very profound, because it relies on a set of, like, willful ignorance that is absent from every other ideology, and
Dude,
it's hilarious.
I have a Ron Paul book from some dude that I knew who was obsessed with him, and like I was like, I don't get the deal with him, and he was just like, bro, I'll give you my book, and I just like had it and then forgot about it, and he forgot about it too, and we just like haven't talked. I think it's still in like our bookshelf, but I just don't approach it.
Yeah, you should like burn that shit or something. I don't know. It's awful.
It's irrelevant at this point. Like it doesn't even come on my blip or my radar, because everybody who says that they're libertarian have just been laughed out of every single conversation that they engage in.
Yeah. No. I know we need to be wrapping up, but that's like part of the. We should have a libertarian episode at some point and just shit on libertarians, because I would love that. But that was the clip that I sent you of Mark Cuban. I know you said you don't watch anything with the guy in it, and I'm not a fan of Mark Cuban by any means. But in that video that I sent, which I don't think you watched, he basically.
Oh, yeah, it was Ayn Rand, because I went back to it because he was saying apparently some like shit that like Majority Report was agreeing with, which it was like sort of kind of like quasi market socialism, but it was under his own terms, right? Like, oh, we only do this for a little bit, like just a little bit, and just so that it makes me money, and then we go back to how things originally were after things get better, and we can go back to reinforcing like how
Right,
things.
but the best part of that entire video, of that interview, is that, like, he's like so because the host was like, oh well, this is kind of like big government stuff and blah blah blah. He's like, aren't you a libertarian? He asks him a question along those lines. And Mark just goes, yeah, I used to be like a really small government guy. I call myself a libertarian. I read Ayn Rand, like you were saying. I read Ayn Rand. And then there's like a half a second or a second or so that he pauses. And then, like, this is just, like, to me, the encompassment of the entire libertarian thought process, is that you have this ideology that you have, like, set out in your head, right, of, like, yeah, small government good, and everything's going to be good, and, like, he's describing it as such, as, like, yeah, I was libertarian, small government, blah, blah, and then there's, like, that 1 second of, like, inflection, right, because that's all it takes is 1 second of, like, actual inflection of realizing that, well, and then this thing happened. And then it's just like your entire ideology is completely trash. It's completely out of the window, because no one in their right mind should be like, yeah, we shouldn't have any kind of state. Like, we should have like anarcho-capitalism levels of libertarianism, because it would never work. It would never, ever, ever work. And to me, like, I was fucking dying at that video, because like,
yeah, dude,
you could see his brain like melting a little bit and realizing that his entire ideology and libertarianism is just an absolute fucking joke and a half. And I love
yeah,
that.
dude,
That was such a good clip.
Paying for private police officers, that's actually a good thing, dude.
Yeah, dude. And like, we'll just build roads and then charge people tolls for them, and it'll work itself out. And something like the coronavirus happens.
Roads.
We just pay the virus to go. Just pay the virus to go.
Pay the virus to go away, man. We'll crowdfund our own reasons. It's the most baby brain ideology. I fucking love it. It's such a great meme. I'm sorry, we got derailed. We need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Paul, you want to take us out?
Okay. Yes, this was the 4th episode of the Terminally Online podcast. And we're about to end this, so...
we're getting better. We're getting better. I feel like we're getting
better.
Yeah, dude. This is only episode 4, and I already feel like podcast like demigod.
Yeah,
and we have
can't wait till we get back onto campus and just like reap up all the popularity that I'm sure we've gained by then.
I'm sure we're gonna feel like fucking Tom Hanks when he experiences civilization again after fucking being stuck on that island or whatever the fuck he was. I haven't seen that movie in like 20 years, but yeah, dude, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be like culture shock, dude. I'm gonna have to ease myself into society again.
Yeah, no, I know it's gonna be rough. Yeah.
All right, Paul.
Okay. Yep. And that'll be it for today. Have a nice day. Why don't you two say your goodbyes as well?
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Okay. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Don't you see, see, there's a better world that's a-coming, don't you see? When we'll all be union and we'll all be free, there's a better world that's a-coming, don't you see? There's a better world a-coming, and don't you know, no. There's a better world that's a-coming, don't you know? I'm a union man in a union war, it's a union world I'm fighting for. There's a better world that's a-coming, don't you know? There's a better world that's a-coming, there's a better world that's a-coming, there's a better world that's a-coming, I'll tell you why, don't you see, and don't you know, no. Hey, there's a better world that's a-coming, I'll tell you why, there's a better world that's a-coming, I'll tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, tell you why. Better world that's coming, tell you why. Out of marching, out of battling, you can hear the chains are rattling. There's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. Now there's a better world that's coming, and there's a better world that's coming, and there's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, and don't you see? Better world that's coming, I'll tell you see. Better world that's coming, and don't you see? Well, there's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. There's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. We'll beat 'em on the land, in the sea, and in the sky. There's a better world that's coming, I'll tell you why. Well, there's a better world that's coming, don't you see? Better world that's coming, don't you see? When we'll all be union and we'll all be free, there's a better world a-coming, don't you see? There's a better world a-coming, don't you see? Better world a-coming, don't you see? When we'll all be union and we'll all be free, there's a better world that's a-coming, don't you see?